Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. Yep, unfortunately, that means it's Monday. Nothing I can do about that, sorry, but, well, hopefully we can ease the pain a little by providing a little bit of entertainment for your Monday morning. Let's face it, it's never going to be Monday morning. I don't get up early enough to ensure that these videos get posted in the morning. I mean, sometimes I do, but it's very rare. So, hopefully I can do something to alleviate the misery of your Monday afternoon or evening. So what's been going on this week? Well, I streamed World of Warships on, I can't remember when it was, Friday night, Saturday night? I think it was Friday night. Yes, it was Friday night. I can remember actually because I was very surprised to find out that it was in fact Friday. I somehow managed to miss 2 days. I thought it was Wednesday. Well, every day's a Saturday when you're me, so it's... get out of bed around about 11 a.m, have some food, walk the dog, sit down, go through emails, play games, record video. It's pretty much the same every day except for Saturday, which is my day off. So, yeah, I tend to lose track of what day it is. But anyway, yeah, speaking of losing track, I'm supposed to be talking about the World of Warships live stream that I did last week, which I think was on Friday. Anyway. I've never streamed World of Warships before. Well, I have, but it was always on somebody else's live stream. When World of Warships Open Beta came out, for example, I'd join Quickie Baby and have a few goes of World of Warships back when it was all new. Same with Circumflexes, but I'd never streamed World of Warships by myself before. And this is going to sound bizarre, but despite the fact that Rita and I both met through World of Tanks, we don't really have any games that we both like to play together. I mean, she plays a lot of World of Tanks. I don't really play a lot of World of Tanks. And she absolutely kicks my arse at World of Tanks. Most people do. I play a lot of World of Warcraft. She can't stand World of Warcraft. We both used to play a bit of Guild Wars 2, but we've both kind of gotten bored with that. And we finally found a game that we could both agree that we wanted to play together. Aside from Star Trek Bridge Crew on the Oculus Rift virtual reality, which is it's good, but it gets kind of repetitive after a while. And World of Warships was the one game that we could both agree that we wanted to play, and we could play together. So Friday night, rather than playing World of Tanks or PlayerUnknown Battleground, she decided she was going to play World of Warships in a division with me, and I thought, you know what the hell, I'll stream it as well. Why the hell not? The problem is, Rita hasn't actually played World of Warships in something like 8 months. And there have been a lot of changes over the course of the last 8 months in World of Warships. The removal of stealth firing, for one thing, which wasn't really an issue as far as Rita was concerned, because she likes to play Japanese destroyers. In particular, her favourite Japanese destroyer was the Minakaze. And the Minakaze definitely used to be, the last time Rita played World of Warships, the Seal Clubber's Tier 5 destroyer of choice, because the torpedoes were quick and they had a 10-kilometre range, and down at, well, the kind of battles that you get into, if you're top tier, for example, and of course this was before the matchmaking changes, so Tier 5 destroyers used to be able to see Tier 3 battleships, and Tier 3 and 4 battleships, let's just say that the captains haven't learned to change their course and speed every now and then when there are destroyers around. And the Minakaze could fire its torpedoes at a range of 10 kilometres, and they were pretty quick, so it was just seal clubbing with torpedoes. It's no big surprise that Rita absolutely loved the Minakaze. Well, things have changed a little bit. Now, Tier 5 ships don't get to fight Tier 3 ships anymore. The matchmaking spread is only one tier. And the torpedoes in the Minakaze are not what they used to be. They now only have a maximum range of 7 kilometres, which is still better than anything that the Soviets and the Americans get, for example, but they're slow. They only have a speed of 57 knots. There are Soviet destroyers that can nearly outrun those torpedoes. And so she was very, very unhappy at what had happened to her beloved Minakaze. And I was aware that this was going to be happening because I, of course, was fully aware of all the changes that have occurred since the last time she played. So rather than just jumping straight into a random battle, I suggested we should play a co-op battle first against the bots, just to ease her back into the swing of things, just to get her used to the changes, and I could talk her through what to expect, and so on and so on. So I jumped into my Congo Tier 5 battleship, which I haven't actually played in a long time. And Rita joined me in a division in her Minakaze. I mean, it's only bots, how hard can it be, right? Let's just say she didn't do very well, without going into details and humiliating her. Now screw it, let's go into the details. She finished last with 101 experience earned. She got her arse handed to her by bots. I mean, I knew there was going to be a bit of a learning curve associated with her playing World of Warships again for the first time in, well, a very long time, but I didn't realise it was going to be quite that steep. So I thought, okay, well, we've got a bit of a mountain to climb here, but that's all right, challenge accepted. And so the next thing I thought, we'll jump into an operation. It seemed like a good idea, not quite as punishing as random battles can be. Still against the bots, slightly trickier bots than you face in a co-op battle, but a bit more interesting to play than a co-op battle. So I queued up in my Congo, Rita queued up in a Mutsuki, not the Minakaze, because she's going down the Japanese torpedo destroyer line that ends at tier 10 with the Shimakaze, rather than the laughably named Japanese gunboat destroyer line that ends with the Akazuki at tier 8, although the Akazuki is a very, very good little gunboat. But she likes the torpedo style of gameplay, it's what she's used to. Unfortunately, I don't know when they changed this, it must have been relatively recently, but you can no longer queue for operations in tier 5 ships. It used to be that any tier 5 or 6 ship was perfectly acceptable for playing operations, but we just couldn't join an operation with tier 5 ships, and Rita doesn't have any tier 6 ships, at least not yet. So there was no other option but to bite the bullet and dive straight first into random battles. I have to be honest, it was a bit of a baptism by fire, and she did struggle a little bit at first because there's so many things that have changed in World of Warships in the time since she last really played it. Not just the stealth fire nerf. She wasn't aware until I told her that it doesn't matter what your base surface detection range is. As soon as you fire your guns, your surface detection range becomes whatever the range of your guns are. Now, it's not such a massive problem for a Japanese destroyer like the Mutsuki because they don't use their guns very often. And at the same time, the range on the guns is so bad that even if you do fire the guns, your surface detection range doesn't really increase by that much because the range of the guns is terrible. But you only really use the guns on a Japanese destroyer like the Mutsuki when you're spotted and the guns are pointing at the target anyway, and you're not able to break detection anytime soon, and when you're harassing a low health enemy that's got their fire focused on somebody else and there's nobody else in a position to shoot at you. So you use the guns to try to set a couple of fires and ninja those kills. So things like that, I had to do a bit of coaching. But I didn't have to do a lot of coaching. It's quite surprising how quickly she got back into the swing of things. She still had the occasional game where she didn't do particularly well. In fact, where she did very, very badly. But it wasn't always her fault. I mean, it happens to all of us. Sometimes, the dice just get rolled against you. For example, one game we were both in destroyers. She was again in a Mutsuki. I was in the Kamikaze R, which is what the Minakaze used to be before it got nerfed. Very, very good little ship. We're the only 2 destroyers on our team, so there's 2 destroyers on the enemy team as well. We both picked a cap circle to attempt to capture right at the start. I headed to mine, she headed to hers, and she just got really unlucky. Both enemy destroyers were capping the same cap circle that she was. She got spotted, focused down right at the start of the match, first one sunk. Unlucky. But that wasn't strictly speaking her fault. She did actually manage to come top of the team in one of the games that we played. This one, in fact. Wasn't a particularly good game for me. I barely managed to scrape 30,000 damage in my Congo. In a couple of the games that I played, I managed to do over 100,000, which isn't bad for a tier 5 battleship. It's certainly not my damage record. My damage record in a game is in a tier 4 cruiser. Yes, really, I've done. I had a game where I did 146,000 damage in the Soviet tier 4 cruiser, the Svetlana. By the end of the game, I was the only ship left on my team, and the 2 surviving enemies, I think one was a Wyoming tier 4 battleship and the other was a tier 3 or 4 cruiser. They just refused to come out and fight me. I'd sunk so many of the enemy team, never enough of course because we lost, that they just decided, screw that, I'm not fighting him. And they did the smart thing and hid and won on points. But it didn't take long for Rita to get back into the swing of things. She finished this game top of the team on experience earned. More importantly, I had a lot of fun playing with her. We're definitely going to be doing it again at some point in the future and live streaming it. It's ironic because the situation is reversed where it comes to World of Tanks. I haven't played World of Tanks in ages. It's not that I don't like the game. I think World of Tanks is a fantastic game. But the community is so relentlessly toxic. Certainly on the EU server, every team is just so full of arseholes. It saps my will to live when I'm playing World of Tanks. Every game you play, somebody on the team gets killed early, and it's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault, and then they spam chat with insults and provocations for the rest of the match, and it just... this is supposed to be fun. And it would be fun if it wasn't for all the arseholes who play the game. At least, your experience may vary, but certainly there are plenty of people who can put up with that level of toxicity while they're... World of Tanks isn't really special in that regard. Any multiplayer online game is full of wankers. But, well, I don't know, World of Warships just doesn't seem... Maybe it's because it has a smaller community, I don't know. It tends to be the case, though. Whenever a game has a small community, they do tend to be... I mean, don't get me wrong, there are... World of Warships has its fair share of arseholes as well, but they don't all... Well, it doesn't have as many. And I think it's probably because there is a smaller community, although it's getting bigger. And I've no doubt that at some point, World of Warships will be just as toxic as World of Tanks is. But for the moment, I'm enjoying it, because it's nowhere near as toxic as your typical random battle in World of Tanks can be. I have noticed this with regards to online gaming communities. The bigger they get, the more toxic they become. It's just a sad fact of nature. Well, it's not nature, but you know what I mean. World of Warships, back in the closed beta, was just fantastic. I mean, we're not talking about overpowered and unbalanced ships, like the Cleveland, for example, before they nerfed the shell velocity on its 152mm guns, and the Minakaze back when it had 10km range torpedoes, and they were fast as well, just like the Kamikaze R is now. You ever get your chance, if you're a World of Warships player and you ever get the chance to buy a Kamikaze R, do it. Just, shut up and take my money, because it's basically what the pre-nerf Minakaze used to be. But as the community grows, and I've noticed this in any number of online games, I mean, I've started playing World of Tanks probably about 7 years ago, and it wasn't bad. I mean, the community, that is, not the game. I think the game's actually way better than it was 7 years ago. But World of Warships, back in the closed beta, very, very tightly knit community. Occasionally somebody would lose their temper, but nobody really held any grudges. You were constantly running into the same people, for example. That's the thing. When you have a smaller community, there's very little of that sense of anonymity that you have with online gaming, because every now and then you would keep running into the same people in every battle, and if you acted like a dick in one of the battles, they'd remember your name. So, being a twat had consequences when you're playing a game with a small community. When you play a game with a large community, you can be a dick to somebody and the chances are you're never going to see them again, so there's no consequences to it. It's ironic because when you're playing a game that does have a small community, you get that real sense of family with the other players, because you keep bumping into each other. Every other game, it's the same faces, and, there's that banter that goes on between the players because they all recognise each other. And it's kind of ironic because, well, I'll give you an example of another game I play that has a small community, Fractured Space, by Edge Case Games. Fantastic little game, and I really do enjoy playing it, and it's not just because it's a good game. It is a good game, but it's also got a very, very good community. I am, however, fully aware that it only has that good community because it's such a small community. If the game was more successful, and this is the ironic part, because you like the game, you want it to be more successful, so you tell everybody about it. If you're me, you put videos up about it every now and then, hopefully encouraging more people to try it and hopefully like it. The problem is, of course, that the more people who play the game, the more successful it becomes, the more arseholes who start playing it. It's just a sad fact of life. And so a game like Fractured Space, and I'm just using Fractured Space as an example because, it's a game that I play, you desperately want the game to be doing better because it's a great game and you enjoy playing it, you love the community and you want the developers to be successful. But the more successful it becomes, the more arseholes start playing and the less you start enjoying it. Well, I say the less you start enjoying it, the less I start enjoying it. Some people just, they don't care, they're not bothered by it. They don't let it get to them. And it's a very healthy attitude to take. You know, if somebody's being a dick, if somebody's team killing, if somebody's blocking you, if somebody's pushing you out in front of other tanks, some people just laugh at it. They really don't let it get to them. I am not one of those people. I get very, very annoyed when that sort of thing is going on. I can't just ignore it. I try not to react to their provocations because then they've won. You know, that's exactly why they're doing it. And, you know, we had a saying in the Navy, if you flash, you lose. You know, if you lose your temper, you've lost. And that's exactly what's going on. So the frustration just builds up and builds up and builds up, and then I just don't want to play the game anymore because it just makes me so mad. World of Tanks, I see that kind of behaviour in every other game I play. Because it has a massive community, there are so many people who play World of Tanks. World of Warships, don't see it too often. Definitely exists, but it definitely doesn't happen often enough that I don't want to play World of Warships anymore. I still really enjoy playing World of Warships. Although I do have high hopes that the World of Warships community will remain relatively toxin-free compared to, you know, World of Tanks, regardless of how successful World of Warships becomes, because of the nature of the gameplay. It's much more slow-paced than World of Tanks. I mean, World of Tanks is no Twitch shooter. It's certainly not Counter-Strike. But the gameplay is a lot more fast-paced than World of Warships. And, how can I put this? Those of us with shorter attention spans. Yeah, that's a nice polite way of putting it. Those of us who tend to get a little bit more excited, a little more easily, are probably more attracted to a game like World of Tanks than a game like World of Warships. So there is every chance that in the long term, as World of Warships gets more and more popular, the community may remain relatively toxin-free, you know, compared to the World of Tanks community. I live in hope. We shall just have to see. There are exceptions, of course. I mean, the general rule of thumb is that the bigger your online community becomes, the worse your online community becomes. So, certainly as far as the community is concerned, games tend to suffer the more successful they become. You know, as I said earlier, it's ironic because you want the game to do well, because you like the game. But the better it does, the more people play, the worse the community gets. But there is one very, very notable exception. EVE Online. But EVE Online's always been a special case. EVE Online is absolutely crawling with arseholes. No, wait. If you're an EVE Online player, don't get offended. Hold on. Let me explain. But it's true. EVE Online is infested with people who go out of their way to intentionally grief other players. It's part and parcel of the EVE Online experience. When you're playing that game, you constantly have to be watching your back. You can't trust anybody. That's just what EVE Online is like. Somebody is going to try to ambush you. Somebody is going to try to screw you over, regardless of where you are or what you're doing. You have to be watching out for it. And yet, at the same time, EVE Online probably has one of the best online communities, huge online communities, of any game in existence. How the hell does that work? It's actually quite simple. EVE Online is very, very loosely policed by the developers. If somebody screws you over, if somebody sells you something and rips you off, you didn't get what it was that you thought you were paying for, just as one example, don't go crying to the developers. The games masters don't care. As long as nobody has hacked the game or used an exploit, anything, any scam, any stunt you can think of is fair game. And the thing about the EVE Online community is that they do love a good old bit of street theatre. Right? They enjoy a good old bit of drama just as much, if not more so, than anybody else. And so what tends to happen in EVE Online is that the most admired players, the most respected players in the community are the ones that have managed to figure out the most impressive way of ripping off the largest number of other players possible. Some of them achieve legendary status. Anybody in EVE Online can join a corporation. That's the name that EVE uses for guilds or clans. And these corporations will band together into alliances, because, you know, strength and safety in numbers. Well, anyway, there's one player in EVE Online who goes by the name of Scooter. Now, what was happening was that an enemy alliance was trying to join the Goon Swarm Federation, which is an alliance of players, and betray their overseers, Pandemic Legion, another alliance of EVE Online player corporations. Now, Goon Swarm's leader just laughed the offer off. He didn't want anything to do with it. But Scooter saw a bit of an opportunity. So he approached the enemy alliance's leader, a player called Branter, pretending to be a secret agent for a shadow cartel that was interested in his offer. Scooter lied and said he needed to verify that the proposal wasn't a false flag operation to break up diplomatic agreements, because Goon Swarm and Pandemic Legion actually had a truce at the time. Through various in-game conversations, Scooter convinced this guy that Goon Swarm was willing to give asylum to his alliance, but they wanted to use their territory as a staging system to attack Pandemic Legion. Now, if this guy was serious about crossing sides, he was going to have to let one of Scooter's alternate characters into the alliance and give him unlimited access to everything so he could verify that it wasn't a trap. Now that he was in a position of absolute power, Scooter then had the alliance store all of their ships in one station to prepare to evacuate their space and cross over to Goon Swarm territory. This was the story he sold them. Just as the last of the Alliance's assets were stored inside the station, Scooter unleashed his plan. He used his unrestricted access to declare himself the CEO of the corporation. And the first thing he did was kick every single member of the corporation out except for himself, and then within minutes, the hundreds of ships that they'd placed inside their station were no longer accessible to anybody but Scooter. So just stop and think about that for a second. If you're a World of Tanks or a World of Warships player, just imagine what it would be like if somebody got access through your own stupidity. It's because you trusted them. Somebody got access to your hangar or your garage or your port and all of the ships or tanks that you own, and then locked you out of it, and they could do whatever they wanted with all of your tanks or all of your ships. And so the first thing that Scooter did was he renamed the station, because he has a sense of humour. He's not just a thief, he's a funny thief. He renamed the station to Scooter McCabe's personal toilet. And then he told them that if they wanted their ships and their station back, they had to pay him 30 billion ISK. And then it got one stage worse. Or better, depending on your perspective. Pandemic Legion, once they heard about the treachery, instead of being angry, they offered Scooter a further 4 billion ISK to transfer his newly acquired territory to them. And so within the space of a few hours, an entire alliance, hundreds of players, had just evaporated. All of its members penniless and without ships. The total value in real-world money of all of those ships amounted to something like $20,000. Scooter had achieved legendary status. Now, the hundreds and hundreds of players that Scooter scammed were probably not too impressed, but the games masters didn't care. Scooter hadn't done anything wrong. Well, depends on your perspective, of course, but Scooter hadn't broken any rules. And the reaction of most of the EVE Online community on hearing of this legendary scam wasn't outrage, it was admiration. It was like, damn, why didn't I think of that? See, what Scooter did is what every good con man does. They get into a position of trust, and then they exploit your greed and stupidity. If somebody offers you something that seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. You see, you cannot scam an honest man. An honest man is not trying to get something for nothing. Fortunately for people like Scooter McCabe, the world is full of gullible, greedy, treacherous idiots. And apparently a lot of them play EVE Online. Well anyway, moving along swiftly, there are two other things that I did want to talk about before we put this particular episode of Mingles with Jingles to bed, and the first of them is back to World of Warships. Those of you who enjoy watching World of Warships live streamed as an esport will be very happy to hear that on the 7th of October there is a server clash battle happening between the EU and Asia servers. The EU will be represented by Odin Mortis, Unity Francophone and Total War Alliance, and the Asian server will be represented by the Zeppelin Alliance, Original Soundtrack, and Panzer IV clans. Commentary on the live streams will be provided in English, Chinese and Korean, with the English commentary being provided by the always reliable Flamu and Isolate. Full details on the server clash, which is happening on October the 7th, down below in the video description. Which brings us on to the final topic of discussion in this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. This is actually something that I discussed briefly in last week's episode, but it's gone one step further this week. And what it boils down to is, well, basically YouTube are being a bunch of dicks. You may or may not be aware that a lot of YouTubers have been struggling in the recent months, thanks to YouTube changing their advertising policy. To cut a long story short, anything that might cause an advertiser to get their panties in a twist is being demonetized. Now, if all you do is upload gameplay footage of Hello Kitty online, you almost certainly have absolutely nothing to worry about. But the kind of games that I like to feature have been taking a serious kicking from YouTube's automated ban hammer. Ghost Recon in particular, every time I upload a Ghost Recon video, within hours of the video going up, YouTube's demonetized it. Its automatic search algorithms, probably hearing me use the phrase drug cartel every now and nothing sends advertisers into a dizzying panic than being associated with drugs. The fact that what we're actually doing in Ghost Recon Wildlands is shutting down drug cartels doesn't appear to matter. The word drugs has been mentioned, and that's all it takes. The Mingles with Jingles videos are also skating dangerously close to ban territory from YouTube as well, presumably because I talk about things that actually matter in them. What it all means is that, well, I've had a look at my YouTube statistics since last week's video, and YouTube has demonetized over 1 million views worth of my videos. Now, you can appeal this. The demonetization process is automatic. It's done by YouTube's search algorithms, but you can request a review from, an actual real live person. So I went through all of the videos that YouTube has randomly picked for demonetization and requested reviews of them. I did this about 4 days ago. So far, not one of them, well, they're all still awaiting review. Now, this is a massive issue for me, because most of my videos achieve the majority of their views in the first 3 days, and if it's taking more than 4 or 5 days for a video to get reviewed, it doesn't really matter to me whether or not the video gets remonetized 5 or 6 days after I publish it, because nobody's watching it 5 or 6 days after I publish it, so this is really hurting. Now, obviously what I'm not going to do is suddenly start uploading videos on Hello Kitty online just so that I don't offend YouTube's advertisers, because that would suck. I do intend to continue to upload videos on the games that I enjoy, and hopefully you enjoy as well, and talking about stuff that interests me, and hopefully interests you as well. I certainly don't intend to start changing the way I do things. Now, last week when I first noticed that this downward trend was happening, I mentioned that YouTube have instituted a new thing called YouTube sponsorships. Now, this works in exactly the same way that a subscription works on Twitch. And I'd really like to thank everybody who has taken advantage of the YouTube sponsorship program to support me directly. It really does mean a lot. Thank you very much. However, well, it wouldn't be YouTube in particular and Google in general if they hadn't screwed it up somehow, would it? Since last week's episode, a number of you have gotten in touch to say that they would love to sponsor me on YouTube Gaming. Unfortunately, they go to my YouTube Gaming channel, they click the sponsorship button, and it says, nope, sorry, you live in Romania, so you can't do this, or you live in Hungary, so you can't do this. For reasons that just mystify me, it turns out that YouTube Gaming sponsorship is only available in certain countries. Apart from that, there also turns out to be quite a fair number of you who are just morally opposed to doing anything that would involve giving Google a cut of the proceedings, because of course if you sponsor somebody on YouTube Gaming, Google get a percentage. And you know what? I can certainly sympathise with that. So, what I've done is I've organised a Patreon page. There's a link to the Patreon page down below in the video description. And I must stress, by the way, that nobody is ever going to be required to hand over any money to watch any of my video content. I'll still be putting the videos up on YouTube every day. Nobody has to subscribe, nobody has to sponsor, nobody has to become a patron. It's simply there for those of you who want to take advantage of it and support me directly. I will of course be eternally grateful. Don't feel like there's any pressure to do so. And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I do hate to end the episode on a bit of a downer, but, well, when I checked my channel this week and found out that YouTube had seemingly at random demonetized videos that were worth over 1 million views. I mean, what? Why? Well, I knew I had to do something, and this is it. As always, it's entirely up to you whether you take advantage of it or not, but I will be grateful if you do. Thank you very much indeed in advance to anybody who becomes a patron on Patreon. And thank you as well to everybody who has already sponsored me on YouTube Gaming. And that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. As always, folks, take care, and I'll catch you next time.